Well, let's discuss this further. I'm joined from Kabul by Javaid Faisal, who's the deputy spokesman for the chief executive of Afghanistan in Washington, D.C. Omar Samad is there. He's the former Afghan ambassador to Canada, France and Belgium. Javaid Faisal, we have to start with you. You're on the scene. The past 10 days, week and a half, seem to have been particularly deadly for people watching international news bulletins. Has violence by the Taliban been on the rise recently? And if so, why?
Unfortunately, we have lastly been witnessing more attacks from insurgents and more attacks on civilians from insurgents. The attack on Continental in Kabul, the attack on the children in Jalalabad, the attack on people in Kandahar, and the attack in front of a hospital in Kabul again 2 days ago. Those were all signs of the increasing number of attacks by insurgents on civilian targets. The main problem is that they are enjoying more support from Pakistan lately, and the other reason is that insurgents or the enemies have lost so many of their members. They have suffered casualties in the battlegrounds. That's why they have changed the tactics. They are no longer fighting on the ground against Afghan national security forces, but they are carrying out attacks on civilian targets in the major cities of Afghanistan.
Omar Samad, can you expand on that? Is it a change of tactics? Is it increasing support from Pakistan that has led to this upsurge in violence, or are there other issues as well?
Well, there are a number of issues. Obviously, there's an escalation. The escalation started out with the new U.S. policy that calls for more usage of kinetic tactics and methods, the increased use of air power, the space, they're trying to regain space from the Taliban as well as limit their ability to move. I think that has had some effect on the Taliban during this fighting season. On the other hand, I think that the Taliban backers, especially those in the region and in particular Pakistan, has decided to follow a pushback policy, meaning that they will be defiant and they will try to, by any means, especially by using terrorist and anti-civilian tactics, to make a point that the U.S. policy will eventually fail. At the same time, there's obviously some responsibility on the shoulders of the Afghan government to make sure that such attacks do not take place, and to not only premeditate, but also mitigate such attacks using better intelligence and better security management.
Javaid, there's an issue here with Pakistan which is long-standing. Pakistan continues to deny any support for terror activities in Afghanistan. It's highly unlikely Islamabad will change its position in that regard. But Omar said something about the American policy of increasing airstrikes. The analysis one that I've read suggests that airstrikes in rural areas against the Taliban is pushing the group into the cities to commit more atrocities in cities against civilians. Over the past 10 days, the biggest atrocities committed by the Taliban have come indeed in cities. Is there any way your chief executive, the man that you speak for, or indeed the country's president, could make a phone call to Washington and say, perhaps we need to rethink the strategy against the Taliban?
First, I don't think it's deniable that Pakistan is not supporting insurgents. No one could deny this. When we talk about Osama bin Laden, he was killed in Islamabad.
I'm absolutely not saying that, Javaid. Let's just be straight. Let's just be straight. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that's what Islamabad keeps saying. And Islamabad presumably will continue to say that. Okay, we understand that Afghanistan has an issue with Pakistan, but let's talk about Afghanistan and the United States. The Pakistan issue is a bit old. Maybe we'll come back to it later, but what about the issue with the United States policy towards the Taliban?
Yeah, that policy is a very timely one. That policy has addressed the main problem, which is, again, the support provided by Pakistan to the Taliban. And that's why there is more focus on Pakistan. That's why there is more focus also on the battlegrounds, because when we cannot achieve any results in peace talks, we have a job as a responsible government to protect our people, and that could be done through taking more security measurements, through focusing more on attacking Taliban and their leadership wherever they are in Afghanistan. In the same time, we are in contact, we are in talks with our international partners, mainly United States and NATO, to make sure that the terrorist safe havens in Pakistan are no longer there, and that we solve the problem where it have to be solved, mainly because if we kill more Taliban in Afghanistan, if we push them back from suburbs, from the areas they have taken in the past years, that will still not solve our problem. The main problem can be solved within Pakistan, and that can be done through coordinated efforts between the Afghan government and the international community, because the threat posed by the state-sponsored terrorism in Pakistan is a threat not only for Afghanistan but for the region and the world. And the world needs to take decisive measures and actions to make sure that we do have achievements in the fight against terrorism, and that Pakistan is not supporting the enemies of Afghanistan and the world.
Okay. Omar, is there a credible international broker that might be able to sit down or do some sort of shuttle diplomacy between the two sides, the government and the Taliban, to at least get an idea if they're anywhere even close to coming to the table to talk with each other?
I think that would be the best case scenario for all sides if there is political will on all sides. What we are seeing is that not only since the 9/11 period, but even before, when the Taliban were in power in parts of Afghanistan in the 1990s, that there was a lot of talk about peace, there was a lot of talk about mediation, there was a lot of talk about negotiations and reconciliation, but it never amounted to anything, because at the end of the day, unfortunately, it was a one-sided deal that the Taliban and their backers wanted. And that doesn't work that way. And so for the past 15, 16 years, if you look at the record, there have been many attempts by many stakeholders to open doors to negotiations. It hasn't happened. And it, at this point, obviously is shut because of the upsurge in violence that is taking place. The end goal should be a political settlement or resolution of the problem under certain circumstances and conditions. But we are far from that, and at this stage, I think that we need to pursue a policy that has that political settlement as an end objective. But for now, we have other things that we need to take care of.
Rafat Ludin is an Afghan political analyst and author who also joins us from the Afghan capital. Rafat, if the government is not prepared to talk with the Taliban because the circumstances for it, the government, are not right, is there any indication from the Taliban side that it might be willing to have some sort of negotiations? Because at the end of the day, there's got to be something that the Taliban wants. If it's killing all of these innocent people, it's not killing them without any aim at all, presumably.
Yes, true. It appears that the Taliban are killing people aimlessly, even though in their explanation today they said that we did not reach the goal that we wanted to reach, and then consequently the attack happened as it did, and with the casualties. But they had an opportunity to distance themselves from this attack, or to not even take credit for it. But they decided to do so, which means that they are insensitive to the death of all these civilian peoples. In this case now, over 100 deaths and over 250 injured people. So, so I think the only thing that is left here is for them to either recognize that there is some pressure on them, and that they have to sit on a negotiating table and reach an agreement, or alternatively, they'll have to be defeated on the battlefield.
When they say that they carried out the latest attack because they didn't achieve the goal they wanted to achieve, what goal is that they're talking about?
Well, they were saying that they wanted to reach the Ministry of Interior and the Anti-Terrorism Division and blow up the vehicle, the ambulance there. But clearly, you know, that is a goal that is very, very difficult, almost impossible to reach. And consequently, it's unbelievable that they would say that was their ultimate goal. I think what they wanted was to get as close to their target and then blow it up. And they were completely desensitized to the number of civilians that were killed as a result.
Javaid, so no political goal for the Taliban, but just another goal to commit more atrocities. The target, the goal being just another human life, it seems. What about the emergence of Daesh now in Afghanistan? How much more does that complicate the issue in terms of the government's dealings, whether militarily, politically, or in terms of potentially trying to open negotiations with the Taliban? Does the emergence of Daesh now have in the country?
Main problem that we have in Afghanistan is the existence of Taliban and the support they are enjoying. Daesh is a challenge. It is an internationally recognized terrorist organization, but they are not the main problem that we have. The safe havens for Daesh are provided by Taliban to another terrorist groups that we are fighting in Afghanistan today. But the Daesh we have in Afghanistan, again, is not a Daesh that is in Syria or Iraq. It is Daesh that is being labeled by Pakistan as Daesh, which are mainly Taliban or other terrorist groups harbored in Pakistan. So this is the main problem. We have to make sure that we are either coming to peace talks with the Taliban, or that they come to peace talks with us, or we destroy them, because we have the job to protect our citizens. We have the job to protect our people, to make sure that these groups no longer attack our civilians. If I talk about peace process, the will is there. The Afghan government has shown its will for the peace talks. We have signed a peace accord with Hizb Islami, and those were Afghan-led and owned peace talks. But the problem with Taliban is that they are not confident about peace. They don't have any trust on peace, and the main problem is that they are not owners of their own will. They are being controlled by someone else. And as long as that will for peace talks within Taliban and their sponsors is not there, we cannot expect much from the peace talks. So that's why our focus will be mainly on strengthening our national security forces to make sure that we provide the best safety and security for our people, even if we don't get any results in the peace talks with the Taliban.
Okay. Finally, two brief answers, if you don't mind, starting with you, Omar, and then coming to you, Rafat. Omar Samad, how close is Afghanistan to becoming a failed state?
I have a different view of failed states. I think that we used to be a failed state. We are a recovering state in turmoil and facing major challenges. That's why initially, as a priority, the government needs to put its own house in order in Afghanistan, whether it's on the security front or whether it's on the political front. And on the other hand, I think that the international community needs to come together and mobilize against these safe havens and these terrorist outfits that have found refuge and bases outside of Afghanistan, without which we would be in a better position. I think that the Afghan people are suffering as a result of what is happening outside of Afghan borders.
Okay, Rafat, you have the last 30 seconds. If you can keep to the clock, I'd appreciate. What about the immediate future for your country?
Well, I think the government is doing some really great work, and on the foundational side, things that have to do with the economy, things that have to do with political structure, with corruption, and so on. The police and the army is getting more and more competent and more in control of the affairs. Clearly, there are some very, very significant challenges going on in Afghanistan right now, and those challenges will need to be overcome. And there's a lot of work for the government still to be done, and the support of international community is absolutely a must under these circumstances.
Javaid Faisal, Omar Samad, Rafat Ludin, thank you very much indeed for coming on and sharing your views on the Newsmakers.